On episode 273 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn how to transform your tennis fitness with Coach T.C Costello. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Tennis Files podcast. This is Mirban Aranshad, your host, and I'm really excited to bring you an interview with Coach T.C Costello. I actually met TC for the first time at JTCC. That's a lot of T and C's, but please excuse the humor. But I talked to TC actually at the homecoming, if you will, for Frances Tiafoe. A few days before that, or maybe it was a week before that, Brad Gilbert came to town, and who I had on the show a couple weeks ago. And if you haven't checked that episode already, checked it out yet, then definitely do so. But Brad talked, and then he actually invited TC up to chat about Frances's ascent, up into the top 20. And, he did so well at the US Open, which was such a fun run to check out and support. And, I was really impressed by TC and what he said about Frances's commitment to fitness and changing his mindset. And then I emailed him after that, I believe, and then I chatted with him, as I mentioned, at Frances's homecoming, where I think Prince George's County actually named that day Frances Tiafoe Day. So that was really cool. But yeah, managed to get TC on the show, and TC is the Senior Director of Athlete Development at the Junior Tennis Champions Center. I've had many guests on from there because they have some really elite coaches as well as players that have played there. We've had Vesa on the show, Vesa Ponka. I've had Dennis Kudla on, who trained there. I've had Robin Montgomery, who we mentioned on today's show as well. And TC is the current fitness coach of Frances Tiafoe. He works with many ITF top 10 players as well, and WTA player Alison Riske, and he is NSCA strength and conditioning specialist and a DBC Fitness Level 1 coach as well. So he has the credentials to back up, his excellent work in the field. So yeah, it was just really cool to talk with TC about, his background in fitness, which certification he thought was the most helpful. And then, most importantly for us tennis players, what type of exercise routine should we employ, especially for us, in between the 3.0 to 4.5 levels mainly is the audience population of the show. So yeah, and then we obviously do talk about Frances's training and, what he did to really elevate his game. And I think you'll be a little bit surprised about how he did it and, what type of routine he had, and how important it is to really understand your body and who you are, and base your fitness and recovery and all that based on what level you are. So I do think you'll really enjoy this one. And without further ado, here is my interview with Coach T.C Costello. Hey, everybody. It's an honor to have on T.C Costello on the podcast. I'm just really excited because some of my favorite guests have been in the tennis fitness realm. And as I mentioned in the intro, T.C obviously has some sick credentials in that realm, training some great players like Frances, obviously, and Robin. So, yeah, T.C, first of all, thanks so much for coming on, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I guess we'll just launch into it, man, because I know that you have a training session on the next hour. So, just want to get a little bit of your background before we ask like the really interesting tennis specific fitness questions. So, like, how did you get into the world of tennis fitness? That's always interesting to me.
So, my story, my dad was a strength and conditioning coach. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the University of Maryland's football team in the 80s. And then he went with the Washington Capitals from about 1988 to 2003. And then he, at around 2004, started working with some tennis players here. Vesa had contacted him, and he started doing some stuff with tennis. And he had worked with some pretty good players, Dennis when he was really young, and Vera Zoranareva, who I think got to like 3 in the world. So he worked with them and so that's kind of how I got into it. He left tennis and kind of retired. My dad has a background in track. He was coaching track in Maryland, but that's kind of how I got into both. That's how I got into strength and conditioning, was because of my dad. I grew up around it. Didn't really know that's what I wanted to do. But every summer in college, I would end up just working with him. So I was around it. And then, it just happened to be when I got out that Frank Salazar, investor, reached back out to my dad and asked him to come back. And so he asked me if I would be interested in coming to work with him. And I said, yeah. And then that's how I got into it. And then when my dad retired, I kind of took over. But it's I've been around it. My dad was, he was one of the first strength coaches in the NHL. And so I grew up around it. And then he happened to work with tennis. And so that's how I just got into it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Like, I didn't realize that your dad was working with all these like professional teams. So
yeah,
really cool, local ones.
He had a huge background in strength. If it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would be, working in this, but.
Definitely. And kudos to him. And is there one particular certification or like training program? I'm just curious, because I've gotten this question from some like aspiring tennis fitness coaches. Like, is there one program out there that like you think really helped to your, enhance your fitness knowledge or tennis specific fitness knowledge, one or the other?
Well, I went out and got the NSCA CSCS, which is one of the main certifications for like, college strength and conditioning, professional strength and conditioning. You're going to find everybody has that. So that's a tough one to get. And I had to study, and I worked my way and got that. And that's the main one I have. And then you just tack on tennis specifically. There's a few out there that I think Mark Kovacs has a certificate. Yeah. He has a certification. I know I've actually been meaning to get into that, and I just haven't had the time, but I know that one. He's the best. So that one, if people were looking to really kind of, because if you take the NSCS, you're getting none of it's tailored to tennis. It's all just strength and conditioning and for every sport. And it's not, if you're looking for one centered towards tennis, that one would be perfect because. And then he's got a book as well. I think it's called I don't know what it's called exactly, but that book, when I first started with tennis, that book was huge to me because it kind of laid out the how long the points are, the different surfaces, the stuff that people don't really look into, that when they just hear tennis, they don't really take into consideration, the different surfaces, how long each point is, how long the breaks are. And that book did a real good job explaining all that. So that's important So if I were to recommend one specifically towards tennis, I'd recommend that, and then just reading those books as well. But the NSCA, sure. If you want to get into strength and conditioning, usually you're going to have to have that certification. Most every high level strength coach has that.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a lot of them. The good ones have that as well. And I think the book, which I also have and forgot the name, but I just Googled it on my computer, is Complete Conditioning for Tennis. That might be the one you're talking about.
There's another one that I believe it's by him. It's like it's the same thing, but it's a tennis anatomy book. It's another. It's another good one because it lays out what muscles are used the most, and it's tailored specifically towards tennis. It's very unique. You don't get that a lot.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I need to get that one, but we'll definitely link those books in the show notes page. And for those on audio, I would held up my shirt because I'm wearing an ITPA shirt. But I actually I got the TPT like level 1 cert a while ago, but it was really cool. Like it definitely helped me to enhance my knowledge as well. Yeah. So I guess as far as tennis fitness principles for adult players, we'll try to like adapt it to, most of the audiences I was telling you before we started recording are like, between like maybe 3-0 to like 4-5, some 5-0s and whatnot, some 2-5s. Like what are like the one or two most important tennis fitness principles that tennis players in that range need to keep in mind or follow?
Well, I would recommend, see, I don't work with a whole lot of adults in my time working with adults. And it took me a while to kind of, because I'm a big, I'm at the higher levels, movement is so important. And then when you start working with adults, you realize that you're going to have a high injury background and you're going to have so many limitations as to what you can do. And the adults that I have worked with, I run into that. It took me a while to kind of get used to that, okay, this drill doesn't really work because these older, if they're older, if they've had injuries, they can't move as well. So I would recommend, and it's just a general strength program. Just honestly, just getting in the gym and being consistent with your strength training will help. I don't think with the older population, it's beneficial to get real specific into tennis and do all these drills, these cone drills going out wide, because it's just not realistic. And especially if you get, there's some people that only play doubles, and there's some people that, especially when you get into an older population, they like to play doubles, they play on clay. So there's not really a lot of movement to begin with. So just keeping them healthy would be the main thing. And that is just honestly getting in and getting with a trainer and making sure you're doing the exercises the right way, making sure you're squatting the right way, lunging the right way, keeping the core strong. I just getting on a general strength program and doing it, making sure you're doing that correctly, especially when you're a little bit older. The technique, there's so many limitations, whether you got a hip problem. So I would, if you don't know, if you don't have a big background with training, I would recommend definitely, at least in the beginning, working with a trainer just to make sure you have the technique right, because you don't want to go in there and you end up doing more harm than good. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, TC, because I mean, obviously a lot of adults like don't even really, lift weights or, have a strength and conditioning program at all. So I guess, maybe the prioritization for them is just the injury prevention and stay strong.
I just think the more, I don't want to say generic, but more, like just basic strength and conditioning exercises done well are going to benefit them more than, doing fancy drills with cones and movement. Because if their movement's not, maybe you got to look at it kind of individually. Obviously, some adults, maybe they do want to do that and they're great movers, and then you can do a little bit more with them. But I think as people get older, just being on a strength and conditioning plan consistently, and nothing, I'm not going to get into specific exercise or anything, but just doing that, squats, lunges, whatever it is that you can do to keep strong and core, upper body, keeping the shoulder healthy, all that. So
yeah, that makes sense. So I guess if you were to design like an ideal, and it's so there's a lot of factors, like, because I know like depends how many days per week you can work out and things like that. So maybe I'll give you a hypothetical and then you can tell me what you think. So let's say this player has maybe 3 days a week that they can work out, maybe like 30 to 40 minutes. I'm curious, in terms of like, do you, with the 3 days, like, do you want them to be doing 3 or 4 days? Do you want them to be doing like, upper, lower? Do you want them to do like full body? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And also, like, I know you mentioned like the prioritization again is like the, I guess, strength training, but like, I don't know if you also would add anything else in there. Like, let's say maybe have decent health. Like, do you want to add like a agility footwork day? Like, I don't know. What would you think?
So once again, we'll in this scenario, we'll kind of view this person as a healthy, they haven't had a lot of surgeries, they can move. So in that case, I would still, for the strength work, I would definitely do full body. Okay. So I have full body lifts, a push, a pull, lower body, push, pull, that kind of layout, core mixed in there. So maybe some general shoulder stuff, and then anything to that person specifically, if they have limitations, and maybe you go through a little mobility with those limitations, or or whatever it may be. But so if it was 3 days a week, 30 minutes, I would recommend, because that's a limited amount of time. I would try to honestly, let's say you had a chance Monday, Wednesday, Friday to work out. I would try to do 3 strength workouts, full body strength workouts. Maybe Monday, Wednesday strength, and maybe Friday you could add a conditioning day, just to if like a cardio day. Okay. Once again, that would all depend on the person's health. Maybe the person can only walk. They can't really get on a treadmill and put it on, 7 speed and go. That's too much pounding on the body. So even walking for 40 minutes, whatever it may be, just to, get a little bit of cardio then. And then you got to also take into consideration how much they're hitting already. So, if they're playing singles and they're hitting 4 days a week, they're getting a little bit of conditioning there. So maybe you don't. So I think it would be important to do the strength work, maybe 3 days a week, full body. And now look, obviously, that can change what the person's goals are. If the person's goals are to improve tennis, then that's exactly what I do. If the person's goals are to, get jacked and look good, then that's change. You know what I mean? So
I've gone through that.
That all changes. So, but if it was general to improve someone's tennis, I would recommend full body list, maybe 3 days a week.
Gotcha. And I know, TC, that I know you mentioned you weren't going to get into maybe specific exercises. Maybe it was for that particular question, but I was just wondering, for those who maybe, I'll just say it myself, I'm a little bit out of the range, but say, I'm like a 5-0 player. I'm pretty serious about USA leagues, trying to get to nationals, maybe getting back into tournaments soon, things like that. So if I really do want to actually, let's say add an agility day and try to get quicker on the court. Are there any particular, because, I guess a lot of us are familiar with some of the basic drills. Are there any basic footwork drills on court that you think are really good? I know Mark Kovacs talks about the MK drill, you got the spider drill, all these things. Any
the
specific
MK
ones?
drill is good. That's more of a conditioning drill. So that's just you're not going to really improve speed there. But in terms of agility, I like to do, if I'm doing agility work on the court, I like to do it with a reactionary component where I'm kind of pointing and we're pointing or going to a color just to keep it a little bit similar to the game. I don't do a lot of ladder work because it almost becomes like dance steps where it gets, if you're good at it, it just becomes natural and easy, and there's no reactionary. You can almost zone out and just do it. But keeping the player engaged by, I even a 4 cone, if I'm at the baseline and you've probably seen it, I think it's an X drill if they're hitting. But just doing that, but without the hitting, where they just go back and touch the cone, but they come to the middle and I point back, I point forward. And I like doing drills like that with the reactionary component because it relates more to the sport. And so then it depends. If I'm doing it more from a conditioning standpoint, I could give a little bit of rest. If I'm doing it more for speed component and I want everything done at 100%, I may go shorter time and a lot of rest. It just depends. But if I'm doing agility drills for tennis, I'd recommend having a reactionary component. So even if it's literally as simple as keeping the person at the baseline, right? And they're doing, let's say they're just keeping their feet active on the baseline. You point out wide forehand. And they go out, hit a wide forehand, come back, short forehand, wide back, short forehand, back. It's nothing crazy, but that way it's keeping their feet active and it's going to relate more to the sport. So there's no, you can get real, I don't know if there's a magic drill that could make you quicker on the court because it's such a combination of things. And a lot of it, some people are always going to be faster than other people. That's just genetic. But then a lot of the way you build it, your speed and your strength is in the gym too. So, no,
100%. Yeah, I love that reactionary drill tip because, obviously, in tennis, you're reacting like the person, where they're hitting the ball. So that's what you'd want to do instead of just, sprinting back and forth. And
then I'd recommend just simple. Simple is better, in my opinion, than doing some crazy, cone set up all over the place and just,
Mm-hmm.
making it outrageous just like because it looks cool. But so I think simple is better. So
yeah, definitely. Especially as you mentioned, like, a lot of us in the leagues, especially are playing doubles. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty quick, short distance.
There's just, I think a lot of times people can get, go nuts with ladder drills and because it looks cool. And
yeah. How would you make, like, a lot of us will train by ourselves and whatnot, just go to the court. Like, is there any way to like make it reactionary, like on our own? It's funny because you made me think of like when I was in law school and I actually stopped playing tennis and went through the meathead phase that we talked about. I went on the heavy bag sometimes, and like I had this like Bass Rutten tape. It was like an MMA fighter, former one. And like he would just shout out like random combinations, and I just like do it.
That's actually pretty. I've never heard of that. That's actually pretty cool. Yeah, because
it was cool.
Thinking off the top of my head to your question, would there be a way to do it on your own? Oh, that'd be tough. I mean, I don't know. I've never even really thought of doing it on your own. I've always, if I do agility work, I'm doing it with the athlete. I wouldn't have them do it on their own.
Maybe grab a partner.
If that was the case, it would become more of a, like figure eights or something like that, where they don't need a reactionary component, just more basic agility drills. But I like to do the reactionary stuff. There's probably, so like I know they have the lights that can react.
Oh yeah. I've seen that in Ray's place. Yeah.
That's not probably realistic for most people. So, I mean, I guess technically you could do something where if you set up it like that, that's like really smart. What the tape was very smart. Like if you just recorded yourself going like short forehand, like short back, and just kind of could go back based on that, it wouldn't be much different. So that would work.
Yeah.
Never thought. You go. I've never thought. Yeah. Maybe I'll use that now. Yeah.
See, this is what happens when we brainstorm, man. Yeah, just like record it, and you won't remember it, and then you could just do it. Play
you could easily do that. That would work.
Yeah. Nice. Love that. And then kind of on the opposite end of like a previous question, what are maybe the top couple biggest fitness mistakes that we're making? And it's a broad question, so yeah, I mean it could be about like any component of fitness, really.
For the general public, I think, and as for maybe more your listeners, for more recruit, whatever level that you said, but I think they don't do enough stuff in the gym. I think sometimes people kind of shy away from strength and conditioning work. I think it's really important to keep that up as you get older. I think I think people for some reason get away from when they get older, maybe, squatting or maybe doing deadlifts, or if you have good technique and you can do it, you've got to keep doing those exercises, and you can vary it to make it easier. Like, maybe deadlifting, as you get older, it's maybe not the best thing to do if you're not used to it and you don't have great technique, but then there's no reason you can't do it like a trap bar deadlift. Yeah. That's a little bit easier, and it's going to keep you in that. So I think people get away from that. And then going back, I think people get a little bit ridiculous with agility drills. Just, making
social media,
making it over the top fancy and stuff. And when you could make it so much simpler. And then I think, and then once again, getting too crazy in the gym, doing, whether it's box jump stuff that looks good, but maybe just isn't really beneficial for someone that could just be doing basic strength exercises really well and getting the same result. So I think that's a mistake people make. It's kind of the opposite. They get away from strength training because they think, it's not good for me. I don't have the technique, whatever it is. And on the other side, maybe they get too out of control with wanting it to look cool. So they start doing box jumps and they're landing with terrible technique. If you have bad technique on all that stuff and you're not doing it for a purpose, you're not doing anything. So, I think that those are mistakes people make. And then, like I said, on court, just keep it basic, keep it simple, and make sure it's going to have a carryover to the court. If you're doing ladder work, at least be able to explain why you're doing ladder work. Is it to get your feet warmed up? Is it I want to improve my tennis? Well, how's that going to improve your tennis? So just knowing the why behind everything that you're doing.
Yeah, really important. I think I remember, was it Gil Reyes or somebody it was him that was telling us at one of these conferences with ITPA how like Andre would always ask him like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But it's funny.
I was important to ask that. It really is.
Yeah.
Even on court with coaches and players, ask why. I mean, as long as you do it in not a, hey, this drill's dumb, why are we doing it? Not like that. Ask in a respectful way. The coach is always going to give you a straight answer. So, I'm not offended if someone asks me why. Hey, I got a few questions about this drill. I just want to know why we're doing it. As long as it's not said to me as, hey, this drill's dumb, why are we doing it? Then I'm gonna
I can tell you got a thick skin, TC. But yeah, man. Yeah, I remember I had one of my good friends in tennis, great fitness coach in tennis, Dean Hollingworth. He was talking about kind of similar point that you made about like, ridiculous drills and exercises. Like you just see them on social media and then you just copy them. But you don't know like, why are you doing this or what utility? Yeah.
It's a real problem, especially with social media. I think you get Instagram and you see some drill and you just go out and do it without knowing what it is. And, especially if you're doing something like, I see a lot like box jumps or something. And if you're landing those things, you're a little older and you're landing them with terrible technique, you're just destroying your body. Why? Because you saw it on like, oh, this guy did it. You see Alcaraz doing a drill. Like if you're 50 years old, go out and do that drill because I saw Alcaraz doing it. Well, Alcaraz is like a freak athlete. So, maybe you can't do that drill. So you have to, that's important.
Exactly. Yeah. Progressions, so very important.
That's why it is important. I think, especially if you're a little bit older and you don't have a big background in strength and conditioning. If you played tennis in college, you're going to know enough to probably not need a trainer. If your technique is good, if you know what you're doing and you paid attention in college when you were in the gym, and you'll probably be fine. But if you have no training background, I would at least in the beginning, 100% start with a trainer just to make sure your technique is good. I mean, you go to a gym, you'll see people with horrific technique and it just, it's like, oh man, this person's just asking to get hurt.
Yeah. The old bicep curls in the squat rack.
Yeah, right. Deadlift and their back is just flexed forward. You're just going, oh man.
Yeah. It's not great to watch.
No.
So, obviously you've done so much great work, and it was really cool to meet you. Like when Brad came into town, and you gave a really cool a few minutes talk about Frances during that time, and then I talked to you I think a few days after at Frances's coming back day from US Open sort of thing, which was really cool. And they I think they named it, that day Frances Tiafoe Day in PG County, which was sick. But I think I was you're talking about Frances and how he committed himself for 30 straight days to fitness every single morning. So I was really curious to kind of get into that, I guess what was the cause of that, and then whatever details you can give us. I'm really curious as to what types of things he was doing.
That was in February. He went, he had some injuries at the end of last year. He played Vienna. He got to the finals. He played Paris, and then he had some what he thought was elbow injury. And so it couldn't really serve, wasn't feeling great. And so he decided he spent his off season mainly doing just rehab on his elbow, and made a big mistake of not doing enough conditioning work. He was seeing a specialist in Florida, and kind of he would probably tell you he got a little lazy in his off season. So then he went to Australia, and he was a little bit out of shape, to be completely honest with you. And so he came back, didn't have a great Australia, was still having the pain in the shoulder and the elbow. mentally wasn't great. And then so he decided in February he wasn't going to play at all. And he was just going to get himself in the best shape he could get. And then at the same time, get himself healthy. So what he would do is for a month, well, first of all, he just changed his mindset. Right? He focused a little more. He went and saw a nutritionist, changed his diet a little bit, which was huge, which was a big commitment for him because that's not something he had done in the past. Then, he would come see me in the morning, and then he would go over to MedStar in the afternoon in DC and see Lance Kelly, who's one of their top trainers. And he would focus on the shoulder and the elbow. And that was what it ended up being, was more just weakness in the shoulder and his basically his whole shoulder, all the rotator cuff he was just weak, and he hadn't trained consistently enough to kind of get it where it needs to be. And he would tell you, he was just, he didn't have the best mindset on the road. He wasn't training consistently. And so he spent that month doing that 5 days a week for about 4 weeks straight. And then we went into Indian Wells. Then he also made a decision. That was when he decided he wanted to bring me for 15 weeks on the road just to kind of stick with it. So he made a big commitment. It was a change in what he had done in the past. And he knew, I think, he wasn't consistent enough with his training. He would work with me and then go on the road, and I would send him stuff, but it becomes on you now. And maybe he wasn't, he wasn't fully invested when he was doing those workouts on his own. And so, when I was with him on the road, it makes it a lot easier. I can keep an eye on him, make sure the technique is well, push him a little bit more. So, and he went into Indian Wells, played decent at Miami. And then, I think he noticed the big difference. All of a sudden, he was hitting the ball harder with the shoulder being healthy. And that credit mainly goes to Lance, but he was keeping the shoulder healthy. And then he was able to, he noticed the difference. He noticed the difference in his movement. I just talked to him last night. He just said his movement is so, he feels like he's moving so well right now. And that's just a credit to him for, it all came, I gave him the stuff, I guided him, but it was him working hard and making the investment that he was going to be engaged in everything he did. And no longer, all right, this is it. The days of me messing around are over, So that was kind of what did it. That month was big. I think month was big for him because it just kind of gave him a little confidence that, all right, I can lock in and really get after it and get this done. And I think it gave him a lot of confidence. He felt like he was in the best shape he's been in a while. And you could see it carried on. It took him a little while to get going. He made some changes to his game. And I didn't have anything to do with that, obviously, but Wayne made some changes to his game that took a little while to click. And when it clicked, I think, you saw the results Wimbledon and then kind of since Wimbledon.
Yeah. US Open, Japan, he just got to the finals, like super tight.
Right.
One. Yeah. So with Fritz. So yeah, it's amazing. So, sometimes like we try to change our mindset with something, but like we just go back into like the old sort of what we were doing before. So like, what was it? Do you think it was like you going on the road with him for, was it 15 weeks that did it? Or like, was it something else? Because surely, like he wouldn't like feel like doing it, like, especially in the first few weeks. I'm sure there were days where he didn't want to,
Well, I think it, in the beginning of that month, getting him to lock in and get it, there was a lot of tough workouts that he kind of had to grind his way through and he wasn't enjoying it. But when you put in the work and you feel like you're in the best shape of your life, the confidence just goes up through the roof. So I think knowing, being on the road, obviously helping him being more consistent and give him the workouts, it helps. But I think just knowing that he was just confident. He was just confident that I know I've worked. So I know I've worked harder, just as hard as the guy on the other side of the net. So I think it just gave him a lot of confidence. And then you see and also look, a lot of it depends on the results. There was a few tough times there. We were in Rome and we were Rome, I believe he lost first round. Madrid, he lost first round. And there were a few stuff where he was going, I feel like I'm doing everything right and I'm not getting the results. And that's frustrating. So then the results started to come, and then all of a sudden that confidence builds, and the belief builds, and knowing that he's put in the work, and he's just he was in a real good space mentally. So I think that's the main thing. You go through these tough workouts, these tough weeks of training, whatever. You get a 2-week block. There's certain workouts that I'll do where kind of take him to the edge. He doesn't like to run. So, if we go to the track and put him through a tough work, that gives you confidence.
Yeah.
That gives you confidence. So expect, it's different for each person. Some guys, it's easy. Some guys working out is easy. You take him to the track, it's no big deal. For him, it's tough. And so when he goes through that stuff, it does give him confidence.
Yeah, definitely. No, big credit to you and the team on that. I'm curious, and obviously preface this by saying, as we said before, it depends where you are, what stage you are in your tennis fitness, but like the track workouts, I'm curious if you could give us any insight into what you were, doing there. Like, was it all sprint work, or like, were you doing any lateral movement? Like,
if I took him to the track, it'd be more for conditioning. So I like doing we have a good setup here at JTC. We have a straightaway out front that's about maybe 150 meters long, and maybe not that long, but we if I'm doing speed work, it's nice. I can do it out there. And so when I go to the track, it's more of a conditioning where I like to do 400s with him. I think that's a real good one for tennis. And, with him, when you go to the track, there's just something, when you go to a track, it's something mentally, you're in for a grind. It's a different scene, you're going on. You're just looking at it, you're going, all right, this is going to be brutal. And so it's a big mental thing as well. Just going there, like 400s, they really push you. And, it depends on who you're with in terms of work to rest or whatever. I'm not going to get as specific, but that I like 400s doing a trip. But if you were going, you can obviously, if you don't have the straightaway, I'd be going and doing more speed work, more 100s with more rest for speed or whatever it may be. But with him, when I would go to the track, it was more for conditioning, and it was the main goal. It was more almost condition, but also for him big mentally. Okay. It was big mentally, because I know how much confidence he takes out of workouts like that.
Yeah. I love to hear it.
That's knowing your athlete. And it would honestly, Robin was very similar too. She didn't like to run and wasn't a great sprinter or natural runner. So put her through stuff like that. It gives her confidence.
Nice. Yeah, she's awesome. She was on the podcast a while ago, maybe a few months ago. But yeah, really fun interview. Great. Yeah, no, she's great. And as far as because I hear obviously from a lot of tennis fitness experts that you want to train like how you play, but then you also have mentioned this element of conditioning, and also how it even feeds to like the mental aspect of it, of breaking through what you thought you couldn't do. So like, how do you balance that with players that you train? Like, how much, like, are you doing more speed work and then once in a while you do the conditioning?
Well, it does depend. You look at the athlete, you assess the athlete, you see what their weaknesses are, whether it's through testing, whatever. And you kind of, some guys running is just natural. It's easy. There's a guy, Andrew Fenty, who plays in Michigan. Yeah. And he's a big, strong kid, but he can run all day. He's come from a background of his grandfather was a marathon runner. His dad runs all day. So it's just, it's not beneficial for me to have him go and do these crazy running work, because it's not going to be that hard for him. It's just, so he might need to spend a little more time in the gym and almost get away from the running a little bit, because it's easy for him. And so maybe focus a little more, work on the bike, a little tougher, shorter intervals, whatever it may be. You got to just kind of assess the athlete, look at it, and then base it off of that. There's some guys, I think they get a lot of conditioning on the court. This is a weird sport where they, it took me a while to realize, like, the norm for tennis players is to practice like 2 to 4 hours every day. It's a wild sport. You don't get that in a lot of sports. So it's already a lot of pounding on the body. And if you have a practice where you're aside for, whatever, 45 minutes with not a lot of rest and the coaches just keeps you've just done it. You've just done a lot of conditioning. So you don't really need to do a whole lot that day. So you have to kind of talk to the coaches and see what they're doing on the court as well. If you've got a hard sprint workout plan, it's important to communicate that to the coaches so they make sure they're not doing a bunch of crazy side to side stuff on court or anything like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense.
I would say that and especially parents at a young age, when they have younger kids, they have this idea that they're scared of their kids getting too big, and the way it's so important to strength train and to make sure that even at a young age, 10, 11, you can go in there and teach them how to squat. It's not like I always tell parents, it's not like if I got a young kid that's 11, it's not like I'm putting them on the squat rack and having them max out on the but we may hold some dumbbells in goblet position and just learn the technique and teach them how to hip hinge. It's not, it's important to learn that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think
in college, one thing I'll say, in college I think a lot of strength coaches maybe don't really know tennis. And tennis, if you're at a big football school and kind of a mediocre tennis school where tennis isn't a big sport, they might just give you I see programs and it's just, you could tell it's just a generic football program and they don't really know anything about the sport. So you will see that a lot in college. So.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of felt that way, but I did notice some adaptations in some of the workouts, like slight, but
if you have a good strength coach, then it's going to be no problem. They're going to know. They're going to do the research. If they care, they're going to look at the sport and tailor it to make sure it benefits the sport.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And I know we only have a few minutes left. I was wondering if you have any insight into Frances's recovery routine, and how it could apply to like adult players and like the main things that we should be doing.
Yeah, well, that's probably a little unreal with him. He has all his tournaments, he has a physio with him, and so he, when he's done, he gets on the table and gets all the treatment done. He just lays there. And so he gets all the treatment done by the physio. It's a good setup. Yeah. It's a pretty unrealistic setup for your everyday player. And so I would just recommend, when they're, if it's just make sure you're getting in there and doing some basic stretches. If you have a injury and you've gone to PT in the past, and whether it's a hip, just make sure you're keeping up with those exercises consistently. That's one thing I think that adults tend to get away from. Maybe they get hurt and then they go to physical therapy and then they start to feel better and then they just abandon all the exercises that make them feel better. So, if you have those rehab exercises, maybe you do those after you hit. You go in there, you spend a little bit of time doing mobility, stretching, cooling down. Then you focus maybe on, if you had a shoulder injury, making sure you're doing those rehab work that they get. Just doing that, just getting in there, not just going straight from the court to your car and going home, just trying to get a few minutes of time to bike and then maybe just stretch a little bit. It's not realistic. Like I said, Frances is a physio with him. I think it's wouldn't be comparable at all. Just because he's able to just go literally when his match is over, it just goes on the table and then it's up to them. Yeah. It's our job to make sure it covers.
Yeah, I'm sure we have a few billionaires listening.
Yeah. If you can do that, do that.
Yeah, definitely, man. Are there any like places that you'd like people to like check out to follow like what you're doing, like any socials, website, anything like that?
I put a lot of stuff just on my personal Instagram, which is T Costello 19. You can shoot me a follow, and I got some stuff up there with Frances. And then obviously just, look, if you got a kid that is JTCC is a great program and some great coaches and some great players that have come out of here and of all levels. So, just check out, JTCC and if you got a kid that's interested in getting in tennis, no matter what level, or if you're an adult looking to play, the club side is bumping pretty good here right now. So that's it.
Yeah, definitely. The best training center around, man, for sure.
I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no, definitely hands down. And last question, just to close it off, is I know you've given us a lot of great advice today, but like, what is one key tip or takeaway from today that you want the audience to like take action on to help them improve their tennis fitness?
If you're not doing any strength training, start to do a little bit more. It's work around whatever injuries you have, but try to get into the gym 2-3 days, whatever you can do, just to build some strength in your body. If you're having knee problems, if you're able to get the quads and the hand, everything a little bit stronger around the knee, you might start to feel a little bit better. So just to get in there and do some strength work. And like I said, if you know what you're doing, go in there and just start doing it consistently. If you don't know what you're doing and you just go into HIIT and you have no background of training whatsoever, go see a trainer and just get an idea of some routine that you can get on that will at least keep you healthy. And it's important to keep that up as you get older.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, strength is the foundation of, power, speed, all that stuff, and it'll keep you healthy. So great stuff, TC. Well, thanks a lot for coming on to the podcast. Looking forward to seeing you. Yeah, of course, anytime. Hope to connect again soon, and all the best. And yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Big thanks to TC for coming on to the show. I hope you really enjoyed my interview with him. And if you did, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a review for the show. And you can do that by going to tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts with an S at the end, or just click the review button in your favorite podcast app of choice that you use to listen to the show. The podcast will help the most just by virtue of, it has the biggest audience listening to the show there. And so, yeah, I would really appreciate your honest feedback on the show, and thanks so much for that. And I also would like to leave you with a quote, as I often do at the end of the show, and this one is by Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon said, "If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way." I really love that, and it really gets you accustomed to doing things 100%. And when you build these small habits and do the job correctly, then that spills over in everything else that you're doing as well, gradually. So, thanks so much for listening. Links are in the show notes page, all the links that we mentioned in the show. Definitely check out TC at T Costello 19 on social, and check out those books that Dr. Kovacs has written. Again, links on the show notes page. All right, with that, thanks so much for listening to the show, and I'm looking forward to bringing you more interviews just like this one in the future, as well as some cool YouTube videos. I'm working on one. I don't know if it'll be out. It may be out by the time you listen to this, on how to record yourself playing tennis. So I filmed a lot of video for that, and so I'm looking forward to putting that one out there soon. And with that, have a great one. Keep improving your tennis game. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Tennis Files podcast. Take care.